He liked playing games, but he never took to them either. Always when the time came to give that extra effort, to gut it out past the pleasures of being on the field, smelling the grass, feeling the warm sun on his face, he lost interest. A palpable dread took over. The same thing happened at school, and then it really kicked in after he graduated. Because no one around him saw it as anything except a problem, he himself never understood, maybe he still didn't right up to those days in the ward, that fundamentally his life bored him. He found it hard to want the things he was supposed to want, whether that meant grades, girls, popularity, whatever. There was an element of sketchiness in others and in himself that robbed him of incentive. He didn't feel this way because he thought he was missing out on an exciting alternative, busy happening somewhere else. Maybe it was happening somewhere else, but he didn't consider his chances of getting there all that good. And even if they were, he didn't imagine it would be enough to make him care. He had enough humility, or he lacked enough self-respect, to see that his life wasn't the story of some fiery passion doused by the cold waters of other mediocre people. That would be too dramatic and already out of the ordinary, and he was just ordinary, a normal, mediocre kid. He had no fire in him. That's what the coaches and teachers and career counselors said, and he had no particular reason to think they were wrong. He'd been lit by a flame that would not burn. This idea followed him wherever he went, because it wasn't any different from him. That's how he put it when he mulled the problem over in his head. He couldn't burn himself up. He couldn't rid himself of himself. All he liked to do, and could do without losing interest in the end, was draw and listen to music. He had a knack for art, and he learned a little guitar too, but none of it led anywhere. He realized in his pre-Navy doldrums that these things were fun because they confirmed him in his dread, rather than helped him to change it. He could listen to music for hours, laying alone on his bed with the shutters closed and the lights dimmed, but where did that get him? He could draw faces of the people he saw at the Home Depot where he worked, but how was that more than daydreaming? He sensed that solitude had consequences, that it could make him numb and insensible over time, wooden as a marionette doll played by strings. There was no getting around the fact that eventually he would have to do something with his life, and that meant finding equivalent to Little League baseball games. So joining the military seemed like the best plan. If he needed discipline, well, that's what boot camp was for. Learn to shoot a gun straight, learn to push past pain, learn to be a winner, learn to be a man. He liked it all right, at least in the beginning. His first assignment, a cruiser, didn't have enough junior officers to con the ship, so they made him an assistant navigator, and he learned how to be a conning officer. He spent a lot of time in the map room, which was always dark except for the green light that welled up through the light tables. It used to glint on the officers' gold buttons and make their white shirts glow. It was beautiful, and he liked just being there, looking at the maps and helping out. They gave him a commendation medal for his work after a while, and he felt proud of himself. But then one day he made a mistake. He had a night watch, and to pass the time he started to draw in the logbook. Little doodled people dancing in around the names and times, faces with puffed out cheeks and crossed eyes blowing wind over the ledger lines like on old maps. The officer couldn't believe it when he handed it over at the end of the shift. "You drew in the logbook?" Jess said he didn't know any better and offered to erase it. "Erase it?" cried the officer. "You don't erase the logbook, Seaman. It's an official document. Nobody changes one goddamn thing in the logbook." The captain was mad when he found out. He took it personally, as if a logbook on a ship with drawings in it might menace the chance for a rear admiralty he saw somewhere in his future. Jess lost his job in the map room and suffered through a long stint of dog watches, and then they transferred him to another ship. He never got near a map room again. Still, he'd been doing pretty well in the Navy. Not too long ago, he even told his folks that once his tour of duty was up, he'd re-enlist. When he was home on leave, he surprised himself by missing little moments on board his ship, the times he found either to hang out with his friends or be by himself. He liked going to the bow at night, way out past the guns and the paint lockers and the coils of rope. He'd smoke a cigarette and watch the boats at North Island sail past the flashing red and blue lights and listen to the buoys gonging in the darkness. He felt attuned to his surroundings then, alive to the mystery of his presence there, as anonymous and unlikely as that might be. It was scary how insignificant he could feel, but he had an edge too, like the leading edge of a storm as it blows in and the air slackens. Flags on flagpoles go limp, the ribbons on sailboats stop fluttering against their masts. That's how he felt, slack and breathless like that, calm before a storm. So he was only supposed to spend 48 hours in the observation ward, but on his last day, one of the inmates went berserk. There was a long corridor that joined the mess hall to the open ward, and it had rows of windows on each side that looked out on the green lawn separating the wings. He was carrying a stainless steel food tray, along with 5 or 6 others, when a guy named Jersey stopped and said, "I wonder what would happen if I busted out one of these windows." "What would happen?" Jess exclaimed, and was about to advise solemnly against it when Jersey went ahead and put his fist through the window. Everybody froze as Jersey examined the blood on his knuckles. It was an eerie moment where they all seemed to be listening for the pock of God's boots on the marble floor as he came striding down the hall to punish them. Jersey grinned grotesquely, all lit up in the sudden flush and vigor of transgression, and then he put his fist through the next window over. At that point, guys set down their trays and joined in on the fun. They broke out all the windows in the corridor with their fists and had a great time. Jess stood utterly bewildered, and pretty soon there was blood everywhere, spattered all over like in a slaughterhouse. Then he heard sirens and alarm bells go off, and before he could say rat fight, the orderlies had him and everybody else in straitjackets. They kept him that way for 24 hours. He laid on a bunk in lockup and stared forlornly at the glaucous light welling through the fine mesh steel grate that covered a window. That was a low point for Jess. He didn't get angry as a rule. It took a lot to ruffle the placid waters of his nature. But he was mad now, mad at those crazy fuckers in the ward, mad at himself, mad at how stupid it all was. In back of that, he was scared. His heart would pound with a fear he'd never felt before, a bracing sense of peril in the ordinary. There were moments in his bunk when, butterflies in his stomach, he felt so nauseated by his own helplessness that he might die. Finally, a stern woman with a tired face came in and said, "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the nurse, got it? If you mess with me when I take the straitjacket off of you, I'll have your ass on a hot plate." He didn't answer, just waited for her to unlace the thing and pull it off. They led him back into the open ward in the mess hall, where he kept to himself and didn't make any trouble. He stayed a few more days before they wised up and saw he didn't belong there, and then word came from the destroyer that he had to report for duty. It was set to sail for the South China Sea the next day. That morning, though, the doctor released him with a 3-day chit. It was a mistake, the Marines and the Navy not interfacing the right way, but it said he didn't have to be back until Sunday. He couldn't bring himself to point this out. He took it without a word. A while later, he arrived on North Island and headed down the pier where his ship was docking. He had the job of mess cook to look forward to, the worst duty he could get. It meant staying below deck all day, scraping food off plates and washing dishes. Each step closer twisted the barb of his heart even tighter. Laura O'Malley was there on the quarterdeck, logging people in. He imagined her saying, "Cooper, it's a crime not to ship out with your ship." But then he thought about everything that had happened, the drug, the break, the ward, that sense of helplessness, and he didn't care anymore. He couldn't. So he turned around and left the base, changed out of his uniform in a gas station bathroom, and lighted out, officially AWOL.